The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear. And the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist. But we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees, even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is Lon Strickler. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio, where we explore the unexplained here on the Paranormal King Radio Network. And I'm your host, Lon Strickler, coming to you within a cannon shot of historical Gettysburg in the anomalous state of Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining me. Now, before I introduce my guests, I want to describe an account that was recently sent to me. It is truly a bizarre cryptid encounter that was experienced by an extended family in rural Mississippi. And actually, the incident may have resulted in the suicide and other strange behavior. So here goes. The witness stated that I was about 12 years old at the time. My aunt had cancer, and my mom, brother, and I went to stay with them. They lived on a small farm in a very secluded part of Mississippi. Now, during the day we didn't want to be in the house, my younger cousins didn't like seeing their mom while she was doing her treatments, so we'd go out and play in the woods or ride horses. We were there for about 4 days. So on the second day, my uncle came home. He worked on a boat and ran outside, grabbed us, and locked us in a room in the house. And his reason for this was that he said there's something killing animals in the woods. Could be a big cat or bear. I'm going to kill it. Now, he was the most stable man ever and eventually ended up taking his own life about 4 years later. Now, while we were all trapped in the house that night, he was out in the woods and we could hear the animals on the farm making so much noise. Now, this wasn't normal happy animal noises either. My mom was in the room with my aunt, and they were watching a movie. We went into the hallway near her room to tell them we were scared, but almost instantly it started. The screams and prayers flew out of that room. Apparently, my mom, aunt, and my cousin saw something at the foot of the bed trying to grab my aunt. Now, they described it as a gray with long fingers and a big mouth. Now, when this happened, I ran to the home phone to call my dad, who was living in Shanghai at the time. I was so scared and all the adults were screaming. I looked out the window in the back room to see if anyone was on the farm. All I saw were both horses and 2 dogs laying down. They were all spread out, and the dogs were close to the porch by the bedroom, which made no sense. They were on a chain closer to the dog houses, but they knew the chain couldn't reach the porch or to at least where I saw them. I could have sworn I saw my uncle in the distance, and being a young kid, was very scared of what's going on. I ran outside and stumbled off the porch. I saw both dogs lying there, and they looked like they were sleeping from afar, but up close I knew they were dead. Now, they looked like they had been crushed. They were big farm dogs, and that would help herd cattle. The dog's face and body was wet, and the chain they were on looked like it was cut. Now, my cousin ran out after me and told me that we had to go into the barn because she thought she saw her dad. We ran to the barn where the horses were supposed to be, and we got there, and one of them was very obviously dead. Its head and neck were hardly recognizable. The other horse was close to dying. I'll be honest, it looked like a big giant bear came and attacked him. We climbed to the second story of the barn and decided that we were going to look out the window into the woods to see if her dad, had been there since we thought we saw him earlier. Now, we were up there for maybe 5 or so minutes when we saw what we could only describe as a very long-legged, long-torsoed dog running into the field in front of us, almost like a deer figure. We saw our dad walking to the house, and so we followed. We screamed at him, but he ignored us. We told him about the animals, but he already knew it. He was very dirty and had to shoot a cow that night. We got into the house, and everybody was sitting in the dining room screaming about what had happened. Me and my cousin kept quiet until my aunt said it was a demon or a skinless man. I told her it looked like a long-legged dog or deer, and she told me it was going to come in the house and find me. I was really scared. My mom and her got into a fight about it. Now, we were told it was a wolf or a bear that killed the animals, and we couldn't go outside any more of those nights. So I don't know what this was they ran into. This location was near the Delta in Mississippi. Quite frankly, I haven't got a clue of what this was. So, this just is kind of par for the course of some of the weird stuff we've been seeing all over the country lately, where people have been reporting, especially these pale white crawlers or humanoids. We've got a case in Pennsylvania we're looking into now. So, just stay tuned. Maybe we'll have some answers and some more reports. So tonight, I welcome Pennsylvania UFO Anomalies investigator and colleague Stan Gordon to Arcane Radio. Now, Stan began his interest in the UFO subject and other strange incidents at the age of 10 in 1959. He began in the field investigations of UFOs and other mysterious events in 1965 and is the primary investigator of the December 9, 1965 UFO crash recovery incident that occurred near Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. Now, Stan is former Pennsylvania State Director of MUFON and has been involved with the investigations of thousands of mysterious encounters throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now, his 3 books, Really Mysterious Pennsylvania, Silent Invasion, the Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot Casebook, and Astonishing Encounters, Pennsylvania's Unknown Creatures, are the culmination of his extensive field research. Stan was recently featured in the Small Town Monsters film On the Trail of UFOs. His website can be found at stangordon.info. So, Stan, thanks for coming on tonight.
Lon, thanks for having me back on the program.
So, you heard what I stated in that story, and I wanted to get your opinion on these white, pale humanoids that people have been reporting. We've got a case not far from Reading, kind of a little bit east of Reading, that we're looking into now. Have you been getting similar reports?
Are you talking about the 6 to 7 foot tall, very skinny, hairless humanoid creatures with very long arms and legs that have been reported?
Exactly.
Yep, I've had some actually on my website, and going back, well, this all started actually in more recent time. This would have been in the fall of 2017, even though years before I probably had a few other somewhat similar reports, but very detailed reports started in the fall of 2017. And one of those cases that came to my attention initially was from a police officer on patrol here in southwest Pennsylvania. He called me soon after he observed this thing, and he was pretty shook up, had no idea what he saw. He'd never seen in his life like it before. But he's on patrol in a rural area that he commonly patrolled, saw what appeared to be a ball of light on the ground. And he stopped his patrol car because he never recalled ever seeing any artificial lighting like that in the area before. And as he's looking at this thing, this round sphere, this round ball of light suddenly rises up from the ground and realizes that actually it's the head of a very skinny hairless, sickly-looking creature, a humanoid creature about 6 feet or taller, skeletal thin, and he believed that this thing was initially lying on its belly on the ground with its head faced toward the road, and then it stood up, and you could see the dull light from the glowing head illuminating the upper part of the body. And he was stunned. He said the head looked possibly egg-shaped but pretty round. The light seemed to be dull white, illuminated the shoulders, the top of the chest, and a section of the arms. He could not see the hands. The chest looked about 18 inches across. The waist appeared to be small, but the arms were abnormally long. The long limbs looked skeletal with no muscle mass. The skin tone of the body appeared to be dull grayish blue. He couldn't see any facial features. But he said, when it turned, he said, I never saw anything move so fast in my life. It was there and it was gone. He said, I assume it ran, but I couldn't see the legs at that point. But he said it was there and it was gone. And interestingly, that's almost the same wording that numerous people have talked to me about for years, especially in recent years, about other cryptids and Bigfoot encounters, where these things suddenly appear out of nowhere, and in a matter of seconds, they're just not there anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what's so amazing. But that was the first of a series of incidents. And I believe it was about 2 or 3 weeks later, I received another report, I believe about 20 miles away, from another person who apparently had no knowledge of this report and indicated something similar had come up out of the woods and approached this person about 30 feet away. Other reports were coming in. And then it was the fall of 2018, I'm thinking about 30-some miles outside of Pittsburgh in a very wooded rural area, and I got to see the location. And this fella who spends his life in the woods, he lives in the woods, he loves the woods, he's familiar with the deer and all the wildlife, and he was up there that evening, and he's hearing the sound of something walking, but it's not like a deer, it's more bipedal, and it seemed very odd, and he decided he's going to get out of the woods and go back to his home. So he goes down to his house, he got in there for a few minutes, he's sitting at the kitchen table, getting ready to eat something. He looks at the back door, so here's this big glass back door, no drapes or anything on it, it's completely unobstructed, and here's this creature, same description, 6-7 foot tall, skeletal, thin, hairless. It's crouched down on all fours with glowing yellow eyes staring right into his face. And he said it went down on all fours and scampered around the house, and he couldn't see it any further. Other reports were coming in. Now, you had a report from Allegheny County. Mm-hmm. I've had other reports from other areas, and the reports are fast. Now, I haven't had any in recent months, but there were a number of incidents through 2018 and 2019, and I'm hearing other similar reports from across the country. Mm-hmm. So these reports are very intriguing. I know there's been I understand from some of my sources there have been at least 2 reports with glowing head, 2 reports of glowing eyes, and other times they're seeing them and they're seeing no facial features on the creature. But it's interesting, we're getting similar reports from very credible people. So once again, here's another very strange creature, a cryptid, that people from widespread areas unknown to each other are reporting. And as I've been saying for years and years, there's something more going on here. You can't have so many types of unknown animals, and you and I deal with these all the time. Thunderbird sightings, Bigfoot reports, all kind of other weird cryptids are being reported. This type of skeletal humanoid thing, the winged humanoids, and then the out-of-place animals like the Black Panther sightings that continue to be reported even in recent months. But the situation is, you got so many credible people that are seeing them, there's got to be something else we're dealing with. And again, we've talked about this in the past, and there's a lot of data. I've looked into hundreds of these cases in Pennsylvania, many 2018, 2019, a lot of reports coming in, and even some here in 2020. And more and more data suggest, again, reluctant as I am to say it, that we're dealing with something that has a physical and a non-physical component to it. For a lack of a better term, we might be dealing with something that's interdimensional.
Yeah, well, I agree with you 100%. These things, they just seem to pop up. and then just disappear. And, there's something that people haven't seen before in a specific area. But then again, this report that we received recently, though I think it's probably about a 2-year-old report, was in the French Creek area, that park over in Montgomery County. And this, for the better word, this white, emaciated-looking, pale humanoid was seen, and it was near a residence, and this thing most likely had killed an animal or a pet and had done some other things, but it had been seen several times. The most unusual thing about it is people take shots at it, and it doesn't seem to faze it. So that sounds very familiar to the upright canine reports we have received for years, where these things get shot at and nothing happens to them. The only thing I can compare it to are reports that I've received in the past that has to do with the Wendigo sightings up in Canada. And of course, I've gotten a lot of sightings up there of these Wendigo-like beings. So I don't know if it's similar to that. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, going back to the massive wave here in 1973 and 1974, the massive Bigfoot outbreak that I investigated, and that's when so many strange details began to come to my attention that I was not looking for. I mean, all these UFO sightings were going on across Pennsylvania, hundreds of reports. And back then, of course, as we all know, there was no internet, there was no cell phones. Many of the reports initially came into the police departments, and that's when I had my first research groups. And we had many scientists and engineers and research people. And luckily, by 1973, I had founded a group in 1970, and we had expanded to cover the whole state of Pennsylvania. So we were able to cover it quite well. And we had investigators or teams, in many cases, on the scene within minutes to hours after they occurred. And a lot of this was well documented in the newspapers at the time. Even the local news, radio and TV were covering some of our investigations. And it was amazing what was going on. And when I got into all that back in those days, and I had been investigating Bigfoot sightings in Pennsylvania in the 1960s, I had always thought from what I knew that Bigfoot was very likely some type of unknown animal. Mm-hmm. Well, as all these events of 73 begin to unfold from widespread areas, from people who had no way of knowing each other, odd things began to come to our attention. One of the first things was we get out on the scene, and there'd be trails of footprints, many with very large strides between them, on all type of ground conditions, including at times in the winter, heavy, fresh snow. And you'd follow these trails of footprints, which would suddenly stop, vanish, and disappear. There's no way under the conditions we found that it could have been fabricated. And these kind of cases, by the way, are continuing right through the last year. I mean, it's nonstop. Even in Pennsylvania, there's been some amazing cases. And but anyhow, then we began to have that weird pattern show up with a UFO sighting in a particular area, and then minutes, hours, days later, you'd have a Bigfoot sighting or vice versa. And then we had those really strange cases we've talked about in the past with UFOs and Bigfoot seen together at the same time and place. And while I don't recommend people shooting at Bigfoot, there were numerous incidents during that time period when many people did. They were using anything from small sidearms to 22s to very high-powered weapons, 30-06s and shotguns. And I talked about that in my Silent Invasion book. And in no case did anybody bring one down. Some cases they would fall down and get up and gently walk away from the person, completely unharmed. And then you had those very strange cases where people shot at them and they would just suddenly vanish and physically disappear or disappear in a bright flash of light. And that's when those real odd, weird things began to come my way, and I began to realize that we're dealing with something that's much stranger than just an unknown animal. Yeah. And these cases have been going on for years and years. I mean, I started writing about those incidents back in the 70s, and I was in touch back then with many researchers across the country who were well known back in those days, and some of them from other countries. And many of those investigators in the Bigfoot field, they had similar kind of reports. They were aware of them, but they were reluctant to discuss them or publish them because they were afraid to get in trouble with their peers, to be laughed at. My position has always been, I don't know what we're dealing with. This is what we're finding. Here's the information. Do what you want with it. But I was hoping that it would encourage other researchers or witnesses to come forward with the reports. Well, these cases continue to go on year after year. And there's other researchers out there very well known who have dealt with these cases.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going on more and more in the last 2018 and 2019, many incidents here in Pennsylvania. I can go over some of those with you. But in all parts of the country, it's going on more and more. And one of the things that keeps showing up from the Bigfoot community is that many Bigfoot investigators, not only in Pennsylvania, but again, many parts of the country, are telling me that they have been out in the woods searching for Bigfoot evidence or investigating Bigfoot incidents, and they're encountering strange small spheres of light, orbs of light, other strange light phenomena. And this is something that more and more people are telling me about. And I'm seeing quite a change in attitude now from many in the Bigfoot community because for years and years, people in the Bigfoot field didn't want to associate Bigfoot and UFOs. But more and more they're talking about it now, and I think many of them are asking the same question after so many years that I did years ago. Where's the bodies? It makes no sense. These things are being seen for how many years all across the United States, throughout the world, and nobody's ever come up with a body. And we know that there's many cases which give suggestions as to why we don't have a body. We're dealing with a phenomenon that's far beyond our present scientific understanding. It's so strange it protects itself.
Well, you're preaching to the choir with me because, you and I have been talking about this for a long time now. And we've had people scoffing at what we've been saying at the same time. But like you said, there are people changing their minds. And a lot of it is these people that have been investigating Bigfoot for a long, long time. And the supernatural aspect of this phenomena is starting to gain some, some more fans, I'd say.
That's right. But one thing I want to point out, when we're dealing with these UFO and Bigfoot cases, I am not suggesting that Bigfoot is a passenger flying around in a spaceship from another planet. We don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know for sure what the UFOs represent. For many, I've investigated thousands and thousands of UFO cases. I've been doing this year 61 years. I've never seen a UFO or Bigfoot myself, surprising to most people. But there may be more than one origin to the unknown UFO category. And we just don't know what we're dealing with. I can tell you this, what I found years ago is that many close-range, low-level UFO sightings and many close encounters with Bigfoot and out-of-place animals such as black panthers and other cryptids commonly occur in the vicinity of high-energy sources. Mm-hmm. And that's continuing to show up all the time. So you've got many cases around, again, high-tension power lines and power plants and gas lines and reservoirs and radio towers. It goes on and on and on. Now, I have no doubt whatsoever we're dealing with a phenomenon that has an energy connection to it.
Well, that's what I've been saying about a lot of cases as well. I mean, first of all, in one of the earliest cases that had possible connection with UFO and Bigfoot is Presque Isle.
Yeah.
Near Erie. And, of course, I did an investigation of an area up in Nova Scotia where this farmer had actually seen a number of UFOs and Bigfoot and didn't really make the connection until he actually saw one stepping out of a circular craft that had descended across the street from his home in a field. And, the guy, he swore up and down that this Bigfoot stepped out of this thing. He also saw another creature step out of it that had a footprint that kind of looked like, I don't know, a 200-pound turkey. I mean, the same type of three-toed footprint that a turkey would make. It's strange. But you hear this stuff. You keep hearing these things. And they are hard to believe at some point, but, we do keep hearing it.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. Of the many, many people I've interviewed, it's the little details that I'm getting, and over many, many years, and such strange details, but they keep showing up. And as I mentioned to you in the last few years, one of the lectures I do is called "Strange Aspects of Elusive Bigfoot," and I get into so many areas of Bigfoot that most people have never heard about before, or many people in the Bigfoot field, if they know about it, don't want to talk about it. And there's significant information on it from all over the country, but again, not well known. Most of this is based on my investigations here in Pennsylvania. And you talk about the footprints. You just mentioned three-toed. Well, back in '73 when we had that major outbreak, there were multitudes of incidents with the three-toed tracks showing up. And I had that one cast that I made when this all began. And that major event began with a phone call that I received. Let me see. I received a call, I believe it was August 7th. The incident happened July 31st of '73 in a rural area, actually only a few miles from where I live, outside of Greensburg, Pennsylvania. And the man was, it was a warm night. The man was in his rural home, shaving early because he got up early for work, began to smell this funny rotten odor like rotten cucumber. The window was open, but the screen was in the bathroom. He happened to turn to look at the window. Here's these two huge glowing red eyes staring at him, but the window's 8 feet off the ground. And they had several dogs out there. The dogs didn't make a sound, which they all thought was very, very strange. Well, he ended up being pretty scared and shook up, ended up in the hospital. And he didn't get home for about a week later. I went out to interview him that day when I got the call. He was still pretty upset. But I had found out that several weeks before, a few young fellows had taken a shortcut through the woods over to the local mall, and they heard this commotion in the woods, and they thought it was a deer. They began to throw some rocks in to scare the deer, but instead this 7-8 foot tall, skinny, tall, hairy thing walks across the road and up behind the house. So I was able to interview the boys, and I got permission to go up and look around that property, and a few of the kids followed me up, and I stayed up there for a while, and I remember the ground conditions were not very good. I'm about ready to leave when I happened to look down. Here was a partial footprint, and here was one complete track of the strangest footprint I had ever seen. It was 13 inches long and 8 inches wide, clearly three-toed. I mean, the depths in those toes was amazing. You can clearly see them on the casting. And I got on the radio, called one of my helpers to come out. We took measurements, took photographs, and made a cast. So that was the first one that showed up, but over the months to follow, from very widespread areas, three-toed tracks are showing up. But we also had five-toed tracks. And then there were some other very strange tracks that were not normal, if you can call them normal, tracks that we had seen before, three-toed or five-toed. They were something even different. And there was no indication these were fabricated. Yes, there were hoaxes, and mainly that was after some of the news coverage began in the local papers, and kids were out there, and they were cutting, footprints out of wood, and you could easily tell the difference. There was no comparison. And so many of these footprints were very, very intriguing. And there was one very, very large footprint. I remember from little village of Hutchinson, PA, I got a call from the police that there have been a series of very big footprints found down that area. So my team went down that night, and it was like living a sci-fi movie line. I remember that night. It was very warm, very hazy, very foggy area. A small little village community. I bet you the whole village was there. The kids were there in their pajamas, the people standing around. They had flares lit up illuminating these giant footprints in the ground. And we made a cast of one of those tracks. It was three-toed, but completely different than any of the tracks we had ever seen. And to be honest with you, I didn't know what to make of them. I didn't see any indication they were fabricated. The joints in the toes were clearly defined in the ground. And years later, I was in touch with a prominent Bigfoot researcher at the time from out in California. And years later, that person sent me photographs, and they were almost identical to those footprints that I had made a cast of in '73. So once again, you can't have so many types of unknown animals running around the country, but yet we're dealing with something where you keep getting this strange evidence showing up. So you can't eliminate it. So there has to be another explanation. And what it is, none of us really know.
Yeah, that's true. You've been becoming quite a regular on Small Town Monsters films recently. Of course, you did the Chestnut Ridge film, and more recently On the Trail of UFOs. And you did some pretty extensive interviews on there, and on there you talked about the incident that you talked about before with the woman who had taken a shot at one of these Bigfoot, and it just turned into light.
Yeah, well, that's was the key case over the years of the many I've investigated. That was the case that really convinced myself and my team that we're dealing with something that's much stranger than just an unknown animal. And I remember that case very well. It was February 6, 1974, up in Fayette County. So again, along the Chestnut Ridge, which you've heard me mention about before.
Mm-hmm.
It continues to be one of the most active areas probably in the country for yearly phenomena. UFOs, Bigfoot, cryptid encounters, other anomalies. And it's 100 miles long. It goes through Westmoreland, Fayette, and Indiana County in southwest PA, and continues down outside of Morgantown near Preston County, West Virginia. But a lot of the activity, the reports that I get very commonly is in the Westmoreland and Fayette County side. And both counties have had a long history of these type of incidents, with cryptids in particular and UFOs. The earliest first-hand account I have on record of somebody who actually encountered a Bigfoot goes back to Indian Head in Fayette County in 1931. But there are many earlier accounts as well in newspapers and from other people that myself and other researchers have interviewed. But that incident near Ohiopyle, I remember that night very well. And I got a call on it, and we proceeded up to the site the next morning. This happened during the time period when there was a big national trucker strike. So a lot of people remember it. There was gas rationing going on around the country.
Yeah, I remember.
There was a lot of violence on the highways across the country, including Pennsylvania. So the National Guard and the state police were patrolling together. They both responded to this incident. I couldn't get gas where I lived till the next morning, so I couldn't get up there early the next morning. Myself and another team member got up there very early. But what I found out was that this woman was in her little cabin home. She lived there for years and years. She lived in the woods all her life. She knew animals well. She was a good shot, pretty much fearless, pretty much afraid of anything. It was a normal evening. She was sitting there in her little cabin home watching television when she heard this noise on her front porch. There were some pop cans out there, and something's knocking the pop cans around. So she figured, well, there had been a pack of dogs came through a couple weeks before. She figured those dogs were back, and she thought, you know what, I'll just grab my shotgun, and I'll load one chamber, and I'll shoot it over their heads to scare those dogs away. So she does that. She loads her shotgun, and she goes over and hits the switch on the wall to turn on the porch light, and she goes out and opens the front door, steps out, and there's no dogs, but a couple feet in front of her, maybe less, here's this huge 7-foot-tall, hair-covered creature. And as soon as she turned the light on, it raised its arms up above his head. And her first reaction was she shot into it. She shot directly into the creature. She said there was this bright flash of light, like the flash on a camera, and the creature physically disappeared right in front of her. She said there was no odd smells, no odd sounds. Her in-laws lived about 100 feet away. They heard the gunshot. They called her and asked her what she was shooting at. Her son-in-law grabs a sidearm, starts walking down that dark road towards her cabin. He sees a shadowy figure running down the road away from him, down the road. He gets down a little further. He said he's surrounded by, I believe it was 4 or 5 hairy people with eyes like coals of fire. Started shooting at him randomly, ran into the cabin, went back out again a short time later, and they see this large object, like big Christmas ornament with different lights on it, hovering over the woods at the same time. That's when they called the state police. State police got up there. I believe it was 1 trooper and 1 National Guardsman initially. Then more came to the scene. And I talked to the primary investigator at the time, and he said, by the time we found the place, got up there, everything was done. But he said, these were very credible people. The one witness was extremely emotionally shook up. And he said, something very strange happened up there. That was based on the animal reactions. Now, I've said to you earlier, I've never seen a UFO or Bigfoot myself, but I've been out on the scene of these incidents many times within minutes, hours after they occurred, and I did see the animal reactions. You can fool people, you can't fool the animals. Very, very common, especially even the most ferocious type of dog. And as he told me, he said these people had, I think it was 3 or 4 large dogs up there, and he said when they got up to the scene, there wasn't a sound. These dogs wouldn't move, they wouldn't bark. He said they were shaking and cowering and crying, and they would not bark whatsoever. I think one of them was an Eskimo Spitz, and it was in a cage. And the one officer, I believe, opened it up and tried to pull the dog out. Dog should have bit his fingers off. Dog wouldn't even move. The next morning when I get up there, everything's back to normal. And by the way, when my team got up there, and we're searching the woods, and there was an animal humane officer, something came up to join us at the scene, and we're searching for evidence. We found out in the woods, right in line of the porch, we found a BB pattern in the tree where she had shot at the creature. And that was the case, among others, that convinced us that there was something going on. And it's an amazing story, and there's other details to it, but there were other cases similar. And some of this stuff is so hard to believe. But when you talk to so many people who don't know each other, give me a similar account, and they don't want to tell you about these accounts. I mean, they're reluctant enough to even discuss seeing a UFO or a Bigfoot. But when you have these high strangeness aspects of the case, they're much more reluctant to discuss it, but some of them do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I sat down the last 2-3 years with some very experienced hunters, different hunters from different places. And I'm telling you, some of these guys are almost crying in tears, talking about things that they had encountered in recent years. Said they spent their whole lives in the woods. They weren't going to go back out again. Something impacted their lives. And that's what's happening with so many people when they deal with these phenomena.
Well, and you know for a fact that Pennsylvania overall, the people are fairly conservative. And they are not going to come out and tell you something they experienced. It's got to be pretty profound for them to come out and say something. So I think it's remarkable that as many cases are reported in Pennsylvania, though, you know that there's a lot that's not being said.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, up to this point, of course, this year, as we both know, I had many speaking engagements that have been canceled due to the virus situation. I'm sure you have as well.
Oh, yeah.
But prior to that, I mean, everywhere I went to, literally, people would come up to me and share their accounts of sightings that happened recently or in the past. Some of these people didn't want to talk to me then. They contacted me later because they wanted to keep it confidential. So everywhere I went, I would say 99% of those reports, people never reported to anybody. Many other investigators and researchers I know, it's the same thing. I get reports all the time. Our hotline has been open since 1969. It still never stops ringing. There are many other investigators out there that are getting reports. We have no idea how much of this is going on. Let me tell you, there's no doubt in my mind, it is much more common than people realize. And it's not something the way the news suggested. On occasion, maybe once a year, you get a UFO report. These things go on all year round, every year. Even now, in the last few months with the virus situation, I'm still getting reports. Not the numbers like we did in the last few years, but we're still getting quite a lot of reports in about UFOs and cryptid encounters. So it continued to go on.
Yeah, I am always amazed at some of the reports and how, it seems that there's some new phenomena that seems to pop up. And, you start talking about it and mentioning it, and people will tell you, wow, somebody's hearing something that somebody else said, and they're just basically copying. Well, I don't buy into that. I mean, there are people that have no idea what has been going on, just like what happened in Chicago, with the winged humanoids. I mean, had no idea what has been going on, will come and contact you wanting to know what the hell did I just see?
Sure. Yeah. And the same here in Pennsylvania, man. One of the cryptids become well known as the Butler Gargoyle from back in, I believe, 2011.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when this fellow who I've had many, many interviews, I've got to know him, his family very well personally over the years, very professional. I mean, he's riding down the road that night in Butler County. I think it was between East Brady and Chicora, as I remember. Mm-hmm. And it was late at night, and he's riding down this back road, and he notices something on the right side in the field in front of him. He thought it was a deer. He slows down, puts his high beams on, and this thing rises from the ground, takes 3 big steps, walks in front of this big construction sign, a road sign, and walks in front of his car off into the woods, and it's gone. And he said to me, he said, when I first interviewed him, he said, I hear people talking about Bigfoot. He said, this thing wasn't a Bigfoot. He said, this thing was easily 8 foot tall, never looked at him. He only saw it from the side. He said it had light leathery skin. The head was shaped something like an aerodynamic helmet. The eyes were swept back. It had claws for fingers. The legs were very short and muscular. They moved, unlike a human, they moved almost backward, and it had wings tucked into its side. Mm. And within days, apparently, Dan Hagman up there from the Butler Research Group had several other similar reports. And my understanding is from Dan that I believe it was in the last year that he had at least another similar report that happened just in the last year. And there's so many strange things going on out there. It's just amazing. And it's an ongoing phenomena. Yeah. And, something else that keeps coming out, I keep getting these Black Panther reports, and I've been getting them for years and years. And these reports, again, very detailed sightings. And, of course, we all know Black Panthers exist because we're talking about a black leopard or black jaguar, not common in this part of the world, but they've been seeing them for years and years. And it's a stranger aspect to it. Here's something else a lot of people don't know about the Bigfoot phenomenon, and I'm sure you've heard this too. It's not only in Pennsylvania, it's been reported historically from around the country, but again, not well known, not very rarely talked about. In some cases, you have more than one cryptid seen together at the same time. Mm-hmm. So you've got a Bigfoot sometimes with a Black Panther or another cryptid seen together. And the other phenomenon is this. Sometimes when you have a localized outbreak of Bigfoot activity, you also get an outbreak in the same area of another cryptid, very commonly a Black Panther report. And this, for example, was very common during a major outbreak here in 1979 through about 1982, as I recall, down around the Apollo, PA area, so it's on the border of Armstrong and Westmoreland County. And from my memory, it began in the summer of 79 when an object fell from the sky into a large wooded area. Soon after, the residents around there began to report screams and cries and UFOs and strange lights and strange footprints and Bigfoot sightings, and it went on for months and months and months. And there were multiple witnesses involved, and it made the local and TV news and everything. Mm-hmm. And that's just one thing that keeps going on. And, we talk about the Skinwalker Ranch, everybody knows about Skinwalker, and it's very, very interesting. But similar type of events were going on here in 73 and 74. And there are other locations around the country and around the world where similar phenomena occurs. A lot of the Bigfoot sightings and cryptid encounters and UFO sightings, they're just sporadic reports. They can occur anywhere. But sometimes this phenomena seems to focus on a particular geographical location. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you there's another location in Fayette County that's been active for several years now. And I've been up there, and some of the other investigators I know are still going up there currently. And there's ongoing reports even in recent weeks up there. But this all began several years ago, and they began the same thing. They began to see strange lights, paranormal phenomena, animal reactions, UFOs, screams, Bigfoot, footprints, and people visiting the farm. Others have experienced it as well. So this phenomena is extremely unusual. It's far beyond our present understanding. I really don't think the government knows what's going on either. I believe they know a lot more than they're telling us, but I think they're trying to figure out themselves. And, I've seen indication over many, many years with the investigation I've done that the government appears to have an interest in both UFOs and the Bigfoot phenomena.
Oh, I have no doubt of that. I really do. I mean, just by things I've heard and seen over the years. You were talking about the Black Panther sightings, and of course, I've heard some along the Chestnut Ridge, and in fact, I heard one firsthand. A guy had just seen one just east of Perryopolis, right there along the Youghiogheny. And he had just seen it before that. And I was with several other gentlemen because I was at a retreat up in Linden Hall with the United Steelworkers. And this guy comes walking into the bar there while we're sitting there, and he is white as a ghost. And he's telling us it was right along the golf course right there at Linden Hall. And he said he swears he saw a Black Panther. And he described it in the size and everything. And, I was the only one that was pretty aware of some of the sightings that had been in the area along the Chestnut Ridge. And, most of the other people just, thought the guy was nuts. But, man, I'm telling you, this guy saw something.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, there's so many. I think I mentioned, I'm working on my fourth book while I have a little time here. It has some amazing strange cases, including a lot of Black Panther reports. There is more and more information coming in. Once again, and reluctant again as I'm repeating myself, that I am saying this, but there's more data suggesting that a lot of the cryptids have a physical and a non-physical component to them. That's why there's no bodies. And do you remember the one case I talked about for Fayette County? It happened years ago, back in the 80s. And I'm trying to remember from memory. But anyhow, it was early morning. This fella just got back in. His car was overheating. He went in the garage to get some antifreeze. And when he came out, as I recall, he heard this loud growling. And he happened to look, and there's a large black cat. And he didn't pay much attention to it. And he went back to putting some more antifreeze in the car. A short time later, he hears a much, much louder growl, and he turns around to look, and now this big house cat has physically grown about twice its size. Okay?
Yeah.
So anyhow, he runs in and grabs his pistol, he comes back out, and this thing is making its way up the road, and he said now it looks like a full-size Black Panther like you would see in the zoo with glowing yellow eyes. I remember he said he took a shot at it. He said it growled, turned around, walked up the road, and physically vanished and disappeared right in front of him.
Wow. I just recently saw a film that was produced by Linda Godfrey about these Black Panthers that are being seen in southwest Wisconsin, around Hillsboro, Wisconsin, in that general area. And this has been going on for years now. And in fact, many of the DNR people and even a big cat expert live in the area and have also seen these things. So I mean, they're saying they are definitely some type of large black cat. So and then they were talking to a gentleman who had one of those private zoos where he kept big cats. And, he made you really believe that if one of those things escaped, which that thing has happened many times, that they can survive. I mean, it's not like, they are from Central America, southern Mexico, but these things can get in the climates like up in Wisconsin and can survive. And I think that has a lot to do with what people are actually seeing.
Well, I can tell you, I just told you about the one particular case. There's other incidents which suggest, again, that there's something much stranger. And the relationship, the fact that these things quite often show up when there's Bigfoot activity going on in other areas. I think that's very, very interesting. But, with the Black Panther reports over the years here in Pennsylvania, there have been many, many of them. In many of those cases, we followed up and checked places to see if anything had escaped anywhere. And there's not that many of these type of animals in Pennsylvania, and it's not easy for them to get out. But we never found any cases where any of those have been missing. And I can tell you one interesting case goes back to 1983, and this made the news, by the way. And this was an incident that happened in a suburb of Pittsburgh. It was called Bloomfield. And there was a large wooded area there, but there was also a large car dealership. And it was right on the opposite side of the woods. And early that morning, about 9:30 that morning, the mechanic was replacing a headlight on a car when he hears this loud thump, and here's this huge black panther leaping over the fender and hood of the car. And the thing's carrying a dead animal in its mouth, and it lands like a few feet away from him. And, I mean, he's looking right into this thing's face. It was beautiful, solid black, shiny body, had a large head, the ears were upright. And, I mean, he could smell, it was so close, he could smell like a putrid urine smell coming from the animal. Mm-hmm. Very deep, heavy breathing sound. And he said the sound it was making was not a growl and not a meow, but like a deep, heavy breathing. And he said moments later it turned and jumped back over the fence into the woods. A short time later, several people saw a big one and a small one together. That led to a major search by the Pittsburgh police and animal protectors with tranquilizer guns. And actually, one of my guys in my group was a special, I believe it was Special Forces guy years and years ago, and he was a real good tracker, and he was out there as well. Anyhow, they made a thorough search of that area. Other people saw it, never found the trail. I mean, they found some tracks, never found it. Nothing was missing. And, I mean, those are the kind of things that go on. Whenever people see them, we never find any trace. I mean, we never find the animal once again, and there's nothing missing. So it makes you wonder. I'm sure there's an explanation for some of these sightings, but some of them, again, have some very strange elements to the reports.
Well, there's definitely something going on. And I mean, and that's why I believe, as you do for the most part, there's some supernatural aspect to some of this phenomena. And, you know, we haven't figured it out yet. Maybe one day we will. You know, just like you were talking about winged humanoids and this gargoyle from Butler County. Well, down here in South Central Pennsylvania, in Adams and York County, we have had a lot of winged humanoid sightings. Between myself and Tim Renner, I think if I just off the top of my head, we've got 9 cases over the years that have been reported to us. So there's something being seen, not just in Chicago and other places, but also in South Central Pennsylvania where I live at.
Yeah, it goes on everywhere. There's no doubt about it. I mean, these cases occur all over the country and around the world. And I'm seeing a very big increase in interest in these cases now. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of radio shows. I'm getting a lot of input, and I can see that now people are beginning to be a little more open-minded. They're starting to realize that there are things out there which we just don't understand.
Right.
And right. I believe someday, you know, we'll have a lot better technology. We'll have a lot more data to work with. And probably it's not going to be in our lifetime, but I think someday we're going to know a lot more about this phenomena. And once again, you know, what I'm seeing is it's an energy-connected phenomena. There's a physical and a non-physical aspect to it. So these things, whatever they are, under certain conditions, they come into our physical reality. Sometimes they look physically solid. Sometimes they're not completely physically solid, as in many cases we've had in recent years. They can leave evidence at times, and then they're gone. They come and they go. And, Lon, you'll remember, I've talked about this in other shows we've done, but something I noticed a number of years ago with Bigfoot and other cryptids, and even some of the Dogman type reports. In some instances, people will tell me that they're very close to the creatures, and they're watching these things, and when the creature notices them, the creature seems very startled, as if they realize that they can be seen. And I remember in the last couple of weeks, I remember reading one of your daily reports, and one of your cryptid encounters, the witness said exactly the same thing. I don't remember what date it was.
And that is happening more and more. I know you mentioned that to me 2 or 3 years ago, that you were noticing these reports where, in particular, Bigfoot, that they, you know, when the Bigfoot looked at the witness and realized that it was being seen, it acted shocked and took off. And it's, you know, that's something that's becoming more prevalent with the reports I've been getting.
Yeah, and again, it's with various type of cryptids, not just one type.
Yeah.
And I think that may be an important clue to what we're dealing with. And every day, as I hear these reports, I can't say every day, but very commonly, I get reports coming in, and so many people tell me again those little details that are so startling. Because why would you bring that up? And how did you know? Because very few people would even know that. So
right.
That's what's so amazing. You get so many similar little details from so many people. And that's why you have to pay attention to those reports. Because if only one or two people are telling you these things, but when you have so many credible people why would a police officer on patrol report seeing something so strange and unusual as we talked about earlier? Why are hunters and businessmen and people from all backgrounds and their lives of so many different people who have been affected by these encounters? Why would you make up these stories when you have nothing to gain?
Exactly. We've been getting more and more reports from police officers, officials, even people, even here in Pennsylvania, we've gotten reports from game commission officers. And, of course, they're not going to make it well known, because their superiors aren't going to want to talk about it. But we're hearing it from them, directly from them. So, and another thing, more and more, and I'm quite sure you're getting it too, I'm being asked to be on more networks, on radio shows, because it's being taken more seriously now than it ever has been. Oh,
definitely. Yeah, I've got many shows already scheduled next few weeks, and the interest is getting bigger and bigger. The reaction is getting more positive. You're seeing a lot of the national news media, of course, talking about the UFO subject now, but a lot of them are talking about Bigfoot as well. And people want to know. People are curious, especially now when they're home. They want to have something else to take their attention off of what we're all dealing with, and they're interested and they have more knowledge about these strange phenomena.
Yeah. Well, Stan, I know the COVID-19 lockdown has caused issues as far as conferences and showing up at events and stuff, because we were talking about before the show, everything's being canceled. So, but what do you think you're going to be doing during the year that may actually get done? I know you're writing a book.
Well, I'm doing that, but again, surprisingly, and we didn't have time to even go over it, but there have been quite a lot of reports through 2020, even through the last several weeks. A lot of UFO reports. There's been strange sounds, footprints, some cryptid encounters. So some people were getting out in the woods, and they're reporting seeing things. And, of course, some of the UFO cases we've been able to already figure out. There's been a lot of the Starlink satellites going over, and Planet Venus, of course, is attracting people's attention. But some of the reports are much more interesting. So the reports are still coming in. I still get many calls and emails coming in, so I'm busy with that. I'm doing a lot of radio shows, and, yes, I'm working on my fourth book. So hopefully it'll be out later this year, but now things are slowed down, so we'll just have to wait and see when we can get it out.
Well, Stan, once again, thanks for coming on the show and for keeping us updated, and my friend, we'll be talking soon.
Okay, and if people want to check my website, it's stangordon.info, and my books are available at amazon.com as well.
Very good. Well, Stan, thanks again, and I'll be talking to you soon.
All right, Lon, have a good evening. Thank you.
Take care. Now, if you have an unexplained encounter sighting, feel free to contact me through the Phantoms and Monsters blog site. If you're interested in supporting Phantoms and Monsters and Arcane Radio, you can use the PayPal donation buttons on the blog and newsletter. Your continued support is truly appreciated. My new book, Winged Cryptids, Humanoids, Monsters, and Anomalous Creatures Casebook, is now available on Amazon.com. I want to again thank Stan Gordon for joining me this evening, and I want to thank you for listening to the show. Good night, stay healthy, and have a safe and enjoyable weekend.